Well, thanks a lot for inviting me today. Got to learn a lot. I don't know loads about Feng Shui, so definitely given us a lot of things that we've got to go and research. So thanks, Vicky, for putting this on today. My name's Jamie Ward. I'm one half of a husband and wife team alongside my wife, Kate. And we're property developers, and we're focusing on creating healthy homes. And we do this by focusing on harmonious design and setting. So you can't build a healthy house and then go stick it in a heavily polluted town. So we don't build in London for a start. High indoor air quality. So that's looking at the building materials that we're using, making sure that they don't off-gas chemicals, but also looking at the ventilation into these properties. We're also looking at reducing radiation and pollution. So this is radon, radioactive gases, electromagnetic radiation, but also looking at what we're polluting to the outside. Finally, efficient thermal energy and comfort. Now, this is looking at the heating, the hot water systems, but also looking at lighting. And the genesis for all this really began a few years ago when I got a little bit squidgy and a little bit podgy. And I went on this weight loss journey, and I was following everything in the fitness magazines, exactly what they said you should be doing. And sure, I lost the weight, but I was left feeling really lousy, wasn't sleeping right, and had a lot of brain fog. So I went on this health mission, and I really started dialing in on my food and think I was taking all the right supplements, but I was never getting to this optimal that I was really hoping to get. And it wasn't until I started learning a lot about EMR, electromagnetic radiation, and lighting and how that was impacting health, I started looking at the environment I was on and started questioning whether that could be impacting my own health. So at the time I was living in a modern apartment block that was brand new, but in the communal areas there was a mold issue because someone's underfloor heating had burst. It was a high-tech building, my flat surrounded the lift shaft, so a lot of electronics, and it was in quite a dense town. So I undenied what to do, and I decided I was going to take the plunge and sort of test this theory out and move out into the countryside. So I went into the middle of nowhere, had a barn converted house there, and literally that night I had the first solid night's sleep that I'd been trying to get for about 2 or 3 years. So this really got me excited because I was already building at the time, and I thought I could start incorporating some of this electromagnetic radiation mitigation into our properties. So me and Kate, we start Googling and see if anyone's ever thought of this such genius idea. But as with Google, someone's already thought of it before you. And we came across building biology, and that originated in the 1970s in Germany. And that's looking at the built environment, how it's impacting our health. And it's gone worldwide. So we went to America, did about 5 seminars over there over the course of a year, certified on their various streams that they got. And this really was life-changing for us. It really allowed us to see a bigger picture, and looking at indoor air quality, the lighting side, it wasn't just about electromagnetic radiation. So yeah, we're eternally grateful really to those guys. So just quickly, some of the people we work with, these are the people in America. So if you want in-person training on this stuff, unfortunately, pretty much have to go to America, but it's well worth it, and it's surrounded by lots of like-minded individuals. It's in Santa Fe, so great part of America, and the food there is really good. Another organisation I'll just say would just quickly touch on. So we're one of the co-sponsors for this, and this involves some MPs, and they're trying to get this on the political agenda. So this is really exciting for us, and it's ongoing. And then I'll just quickly mention these guys. So they're the founders of this in Germany. They do a really good online course, so you can certify with them in that, and you take an exam at the end. You do it over about a year. So if you can't get to America, or you're concerned about the carbon footprint side of things, that's a really good place to start. So I'm just going to quickly touch on some facts, and then we'll jump into sleep, electromagnetic radiation, and air quality. And then if there's something specific, maybe on a project that you guys are doing, feel free to ask, because there's quite a lot to cover, and it's hard to know what people are doing, if they're doing new builds or refurbs, or just literally thinking of putting a lick of paint on their walls. So the British research establishment in the UK estimate it's costing £2.5 billion per year in first year medical costs to the NHS alone, which is a staggering figure. And that's conservative. They said it could be up to £10 billion. And this doesn't look at anything like productivity that we gain to the economy. So there's big numbers here. And in our housing history in the UK, there seemed to be a big inflection point. It was around the war, and the Blitz had left the country devastated, and we had to get these houses up quick. So it was all about speed, it was all about costs. So we had to invent new materials, new products, new ways of getting these things up. But we've got to the point where we're adding 55,000 chemicals to new buildings, and that's compared to only 50 at the turn of the 20th century. So it's a huge difference in such a short space of time. And you couple that with the fact that we're these indoor couch potatoes that, we're living in there, breathing this stuff in. And it's no wonder things like asthma's through the roof, mental health issues are rising. We're in the middle of an obesity epidemic. And to be honest, some of this is kind of frightening when you start reading the research. And I know Kate, my wife, kind of went through this at the time where it's like, what's going on? What do I do? But home's meant to be this uplifting environment that we feel safe, secure, and we're with all the family. So we want to see this as an opportunity to get that back rather than it being this doomsday prophecy, you're going to die tomorrow. Just quickly mention, I've seen people taking photos. We put all the slides up there, so that's on every single slide that you'll see today. So if you go to that link, you can download it, and all the hyperlinks that'll be down here, you can click on, they should work. So that leads us into our first topic, the land of Nod. You're probably feeling that, it's that time of day. I'm told that my voice is a bit monotonous, so maybe it's me. But if I could promise you all of these things in a pill or a device, you'd all be clambering off your seats and saying you'll pay this amount of money. But as soon as you mention the word sleep, it suddenly becomes a lot less sexy. But sleep is this incredibly important thing where we regenerate and we replenish from a hard day's work. Humans aren't meant to be wrapped up in cotton wool. We're meant to be going out there, getting bashed, getting bruised, getting stressed out. But so long as we come home every night and we can regenerate, then that's a good thing. We can handle that. And where was I with this? So to get a good night's sleep, we need to have something called a healthy circadian rhythm. And this is simply the day and night cycle in the body. So in the morning, you get a big surge of cortisol, and that gets us out of bed. Then that slowly drifts down throughout the day, and then your sleep hormones come out, melatonin, and that gets us all nice and drowsy. And there's loads of bodily functions like that are working on this precise 24-hour circadian rhythm. So to get a good night's sleep, we need a healthy circadian rhythm, and to be able to know what time of day it is, our body has to figure out what time of day it is. It hasn't got a watch on it. So we need to get this signal from somewhere else, and the human body primarily gets it from sunlight, and sunlight is constantly varying throughout the day. So I've got two examples here. So this is daylight, this is sunset, and this is what we call a spectrum of light, and you measure it with a spectrometer. And as you can see here, there's a lot more blue in the day, there's a lot less blue in the evening. And to assign, what we do is we assign a number to this to let us know what that blend of colours are. So in the day you have a higher colour temperature, and it's measured in kelvins. And as you go throughout the day and you get to the evening, that colour temperature starts to drop. So then you look at artificial light sources, and they're radically different to what we're seeing here. To be fair to incandescent, that looks pretty good. It is like sunset. But the modern ones where we're at the moment, these cool white LEDs, there's a huge bolt of blue there. So if you picture that here where there's a lot of blue light here, that's telling us it's daytime, it's morning. Whereas if you're under artificial sources at night and you're getting this big load of blue light, it's telling you it's morning, your body starts getting confused, and you're going to start surging cortisol up in the evenings when actually it should be melatonin and you should be able to get to sleep. So we need two things really to entrain this circadian rhythm. So we need a lot of daylight exposure in the day, but in the evening we need to be avoiding these artificial sources. So the first thing you can do with a healthy home is get one and then pretty much go sit outside. So complete waste of money. Obviously we're not going to do that. So if you are in a new build situation, obviously larger window openings, that's not revolutionary, it's going to increase the daylight. But the higher you place them up on a wall, the more daylight comes through if you can see more of the sky, versus if they're lower and wider. But all glass does have some sort of filtering effect with sunlight. So I measured some in an old Georgian property. There wasn't any fancy glazing on that, so it wasn't energy efficient. There wasn't a film over that, and that was only allowing 60% of the natural sunlight through. And that also blocks out ultraviolet and a lot of infrared, which we do need for our biology. So again, you need to get outside as much as possible throughout the day. But in the evenings, in Europe, we've banned incandescents, we've now banned halogens, so we're stuck with LEDs, so we need to make the best of a bad situation. And when you come to look for your lighting, here's the colour temperature that I was on about, so it's measured in Kelvin, and if you can get it below 2700 Kelvin, then that's pretty good. Anything lower than that, then even better. And this has a really high colour rendering index. So this is the quality of colours that we can perceive under that light source. The sun is the gold standard, and that's rated at 100. Any fake light over 90 is pretty impressive. So hopefully that'll just keep getting better, but that's something that you want to bear in mind. I'll only quickly touch on this. This is flicker. But LEDs are constantly turning on and off, but they're going so fast that our eyes can't perceive them, but our cells and our body can. So if you can find one that has a very low flicker, then that's good. I mean, this is as low as you'll probably get with an LED. So I'm a bit of a geek, and I brought some gadgets today, and I brought my spectrometer. Oh, it's not come up. Oh, nightmare. Anyway, so I measured these. Can you see the difference between this light color and the ones running along the edge? So these are pretty much 2700 Kelvin, but the flicker's up at 40%, which is fairly common for LEDs. They sort of can go up to 70%. But these ones over here are 4000. So the difference that your health would have at night time being under the two light sources is quite drastic. Electromagnetic radiation, quite a confusing topic, and it's probably a week-long seminar. And there's lots of confusing names out there: electrosmog, electropollution, EMFs, EMR, dirty electricity, all these buzzwords. But for the purposes of today, I'm just going to put them into two categories. So we've got wiring and wireless. So they're the sources that this electromagnetic radiation can come from. So when we're talking about wiring, we're talking about the electric cables in the house, the wiring that's inside appliances, anything that's carrying electricity. And then the wireless are your cordless phones, your internet routers, Bluetooth devices, even baby monitors, and even burglar alarms now. They're even being fitted with microwave radiation. And the bit that has me concerned the most with this are children, and they're more susceptible and more sensitive to this form of radiation. Their brains have a higher water content, so they're able to absorb more of that energy. Their brain neurons, which are undergoing a crazy amount of development, they don't have something called myelin wrapped around it. So that's like, if you picture an electric cable, and you've got that protective outer sheath around it, their brains don't have that, and it makes them more susceptible. And electromagnetic radiation, it also does affect your sleep, but it has these other hosts of issues. So oxidative stress, calcium pouring into your cells, so you end up calcification and bone issues, reduced fertility, and DNA damage. So it's quite a lot there to be concerned about, and there's so much research out there now, peer-reviewed, published. It's probably the topic we've actually researched the most, but because there's so many conflicting sources and it's quite a confusing topic, it doesn't quite seem to, get the attention I think it deserves in sort of the public domain. So when we come to mitigate, if we talk about the wiring in the houses, in building biology, the biggest bang for your buck is focusing on the sleeping area. So if you can't do anything else, then focus on that. Again, that's where we regenerate and we replenish. So that seems to make sense to focus on that. And if there's no electricity running to your bedroom, then you're not going to get that form of radiation coming from the building wiring. So the simplest and easiest thing you can do is go to your fuse board, see which circuits run to your bedroom and possibly the room underneath, and you can just turn it off. That's free, that costs nothing. But I appreciate we're all kind of lazy, and the fuse board's always behind a Hoover or what have you, the Christmas decorations. So you can get these things called kill switches, and they work just like a little light switch, and you put them in your bedroom. That runs back to the fuse boards, and that de-energizes the circuit. But if you're doing that in an existing home, you have to sort of do a bit of rewiring in your bedroom and start with the fuse board, so that's a bit of a pain. So we're looking to bring these over from America, and it just works on a car alarm pretty much. So it's a little short zap. It goes back to your fuse board, and that means the wiring that you have to do is only at that back at the fuse board. You haven't had to do it in the bedroom. And then if that all sounds a bit too tinfoil hat, at least pull out your lamps that are around your bedside table, because they're incredibly close to you. And even if the light's not on, they're still emitting some form of electromagnetic radiation. Now, wireless radiation, people are always very concerned about what's going on outside. The cell tower that's gone up a few hundred meters away. The internet's rife with 5G at the moment. But the sources that we use inside, they're often way more powerful because of the proximity to them. Things like cordless phones and internet, they're constantly emitting, not just the base station for the cordless phone, also the receiver, the handset. So, you know, the sources inside, they serve a lot of attention. It's not just focusing on the outside. So similar to what we said about the building wiring, the easiest way to deal with this and the cheapest is to just flick off a switch before you go to bed. But again, you don't want to do that, we're lazy, so let's automate it. And if you just get your internet routers, you can plug that into that. The timers that we all used that we thought would trick the burglars that we weren't in when we went away and put our lamps in. So just put your internet router on that, set it for 10 PM till 7 AM, then you don't have to think about it. And then moving along the sort of continuum of complexity and expense, you can obviously look to hardwire all your connections in your house, which again, expensive, bit of a pain. So you can sort of cheat, and there's something here, I'm pointing to it down there, and it's called Mocha. So think of your coffee. Basically, it piggybacks on all your TV cables in your house. So anywhere you've got a TV point, you can actually get a hardwired connection from that. So Mocha is the name of the technology, and I think that link will explain that to you. Cordless phones, again, try and opt for the hardwired solution. It's not that inconvenient to have a cord, but if you really, really can't let go, you can get low EMF cordless phones, which feels a bit like an oxymoron. But what you want to look for is something that's called Eco Mode Plus. And Gigaset down here, they invented the technology, but they licensed it out to manufacturers like Philips. So no one's going to tell you you've got this tinfoil low EMF handset. The only caveat I would say is make sure you follow the instructions in that, because by default it's not on this Eco Mode Plus that they talk about. But what that means is it'll only emit radiation while that phone call's on. As soon as the phone call's over, then there'll be no radiation, no communication between those two devices. Then obviously in new builds we can get a lot more fancy and start thinking about shielding materials and shielding electric cables and thinking about the metal in the buildings. So if anyone's doing anything specific like that, then please feel free to ask in the Q&As. Now we know that, we all eat 3 times a day. We drink however many litres of water that the government have decided is what we need to drink that year. But we breathe between 17 and 23,000 times a day. And oxygen is pretty much one of the most crucial things to our body. So if we're breathing in pollutant air, we're essentially making ourselves hypoxic, and our cellular respiration is going to struggle. And the UK has the highest childhood asthma rates in the entire world. So in every classroom, there's an average of 3 children with asthma. And yes, there's a myriad of reasons for this, but indoor air pollution is going to be playing a big part to that. And there's all this talk at the moment about outdoor air pollution, and that's really good. And I'm really excited that we're seeing that in the press and it's being spoke about. But indoor air is often more times polluted than outside air. And things like volatile organic compounds, VOCs, they're always more polluted inside. And these indoor pollutants can even be up to 5 times more polluted than outside. And this is the place that we're all spending our time, and we're breathing this stuff in. So Exeter University did some really interesting research where basically the more energy efficient your home is, the more likely you are to have asthma. And that's because we're making these hyper-insulated buildings, they're sealed in, they get sweaty, you're off-gassing those 55,000 chemicals, and we're spending even more time inside them breathing this stuff in. Now, indoor pollutants, when we talk about those, we're talking chemicals, compounds, gases that are leaching out of the building materials, the furnishings, the finishings, So things like volatile organic compounds, formaldehyde, pesticides, biocides, all these nasties. But we're also talking about the sources that each and every one of us are generating. So when we're respiring, we're breathing out carbon dioxide. We're also breathing out humidity. When we have a shower, there's humidity. When we're cooking, there's combustion gases. When we're cleaning, there's volatile organic compounds. And relative humidity is an interesting one to pay attention to, because if you see here, this is the percentage. So we're talking the moisture vapor that's in the air. And there seems to be the sweet spot between 40 and 60%, where you're not getting bacteria and you're not getting viruses. So this is something that we want to pay attention to. So the first solution to this is dilution. And I'm sure you're all chuffed a bit that you've spent £100 to be here to be told to open your windows. But if you open your window and you haven't opened another door in that room or another window, in winter it can take between 30 and 75 minutes to get a complete air change in that room. And in summer that's between 3 and 6 hours. So it's a waste of time and people probably aren't doing that. Whereas if you do something called cross ventilation, so you open another window, you open that door into the rest of the house, in winter that drops to 2 to 4 minutes to completely get rid of that stale air in the house, and 12 to 20 minutes in the summer. And you'll notice there's a difference there between the seasons, and that isn't because the researchers hate the cold weather and they only want to open a window for 2 minutes. There's a bit of science to it. And obviously in winter, the outside temperature's freezing, inside it's warm, and you get this temperature differential, which causes a big pressure gradient, so the air can just come whooshing through. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is it's just important to remember not to overventilate going back to this situation, because in winter the outside air is incredibly dry, so that'll come in and that'll soak up whatever moisture's in there, and then you'll get into this danger zone down here. And a good way of getting an idea of your sort of ventilation rates is getting a little cheap CO2 meter. This one's quite accurate compared to more expensive equipment, which I think on Amazon is about £100. But even a little cheap one that's probably £30 is going to be a good habit to get into, because it'll start letting you see what kind of what the levels are and how stale that air is. We sort of use it as a proxy for fresh air. Not entirely accurate for that, but lets you get a good idea and it's accessible. So to give you some ideas, the outside air is between 400, 500 parts per million. The research I've read, the cognition impairment starts at 800 parts per million. Most guidance says to keep it below 1,000 parts per million. In schools, they say below 1,500 parts per million, even though they're more susceptible again to indoor air pollutants. But I, again, geeked out, brought a bit of equipment today to measure that, and in here at the moment we're at about 1,900 parts per million, which when we go out and we start cross-ventilating, I've been that annoying person opening that up all day when I've seen people getting a bit cold. That then drops down to 800 parts per million, so you can just see that by us being in here we're creating pollution. We, at our business, we just like testing stuff because there's no point doing this stuff if you don't see an improvement. And we came across a really good company called Waverton Analytics. And what they do is they send out to you a test tube in the post. It comes with a little air pump, and it will drag the air through this test tube, send it off to the lab, and they tell you all the volatile organic compounds, all the sources, formaldehyde, all your mold issues. And I think the entry level one's about £100, and I know it's annoying to get given a shopping list at a talk, but it really does tell you a lot of information. And from all the various properties that we've tested, we wanted to get an idea of what the current situation is in UK housing. The biggest source for VOCs is always your paint. So if you're going to do one thing on your next refurb, just selecting a natural low VOC paint is going to be a huge improvement to the current situation you're in. And down here there's a couple of paints that we use, Arrow paint and Edward Bulmer paint. They're actually using the same paint, but Arrow's German and Edward Bulmer, they add their own pigments to it, and their pigments are a bit more UK recognised than the German pigments, so I think that's why they came about. Also on surfaces, your flooring, so carpet's a really well designed product because it does such a good job of just clinging on to all that dirt and dust. So much so that the Canada Housing and Mortgage Association say for every square metre you need to be vacuuming for 30 to 60 minutes to get all of that up. I've got a life. So if you can opt for hardwood flooring and choose things like natural oils rather than varnishes, then this is a great thing to do. And then you can have rugs on there, because I know in England we like having carpet underneath our feet. But at least those rugs, you can take them outside and beat them, and you're not breathing that air in. If you are insistent on keeping carpets, then at least think about the underlays. I know you can get wool underlays, but we were talking about this at lunch. With wool, sometimes you do get issues with moths. So I don't know if there might be other natural fibres you can use, but underlays, they're synthetic and they're typically made out of plastics, and they release a lot of formaldehyde into the room. And same with the carpets themselves, they're often synthetic and plastic. So just trying to find more natural products, but wool is one, but you can get these moth issues. So do your own research on that one. When you come to vacuum, choose to use a HEPA vacuum. How vacuums work, they suck that air in, you've got your big bag, and then the air goes out, and that's how it gets the suction. But the bag is trying to capture all that dust coming through. The really toxic and nasty chemicals in the carpet, they're so small that they just fly through that, and that's getting chucked back into the air, and we're inhaling that. And the same with our heating systems, radiators, they work on something called convection heating. So they heat the hot air, the cooler air starts sinking, and you get this whirlwind going on. But that's picking up all that dust, and we're breathing that in. So if you can go for radiant heat sources, such as in-wall heating, they don't work on these convection currents. They heat the objects inside, i.e. us. I think that's pretty much it. One thing that we found quite funny when we did a building biology course was, and we wish we knew it when we were kids, was when you're sleeping, you're obviously sweating into the mattress, and you do that there's probably quite a lot of moisture in there, and sort of going back to the relative humidity thing, you're going to start creating a breeding ground for bacteria and viruses. So basically, when our mothers told us to make the bed, they really got it wrong on that one. So if you leave your duvet cover off the bed, it gives a chance for all that moisture to go back into the air every day, and you're not creating this breeding ground for nasties like bacteria and viruses. That's your lot. So if there's any questions anyone has or anything more technical, then yeah, more than happy to ask. If anyone wants to ask about kit, then go for it, or if there's more technical things with EMFs maybe.
You were showing us your CO2 meter.
Yeah.
Is there anything similar for EMFs?
EMFs, I didn't touch on that. Did put a little link. So with all this stuff, whether you're measuring indoor air quality or EMFs, there's obviously this crazy continuum where you've got really cheap and really expensive and research grade. And when I first got interested in this, I was down at that cheap end just to start getting an idea of things. And unless you're trying to do repeatable, reproducible research, I don't think you need the fancy stuff. So I put, where is it? I don't know. I think this is their company website, but they're called Cornet, and they do a meter that's about £100. It'll be on the website, but it's Cornet meter, and it'll just get you in the habit of identifying sources, because there'll be things that you never even expected. We had one in our house where the burglar alarms got changed because we were doing some refurb work, and they knew the drill in this house. We had been putting the shielded cabling in, they knew not to put wireless sensors in and all this, and literally as soon as they went, that night my sleep was crap, and I was like, right, I feel like a paranoid schizophrenic. Tested and it didn't show anything, but the mistake I made back then was my meter range wasn't high enough, and actually they've now brought out these 10 gigahertz sensors that are emitting, and it was scary when that went off. So yeah, you've really got to test your environment, because there'll always be something.
Acousticom sell the meters that do the digital, you can measure the digital pulsing.
So do you want to say what's the name of the actual meter? Because they've got a few, haven't they?
Acousticom?
Acousticom. Yeah, so that's one. Same company in Canada that we're looking at bringing in that remote. They do one that basically we're in a sort of testing phase at the moment, and it's really simple. Looks a bit kooky, I'd say, but you just turn it on and so you just like point around and then you'll find it and you can have the volume on. But the good thing why I like this one is because it goes to 12 gigahertz. Like I said, that sensor that I caught in our house was 10 gigahertz. And most of these companies, I think Acousticom might go up to 8 gigahertz. Cornet are probably at 6 gigahertz. So that's why we're looking at trying to get these guys to come over to England, is because it's just a lot more range and they're affordable. Yeah.
Well, measuring obviously is important, but what some of us are concerned about, and the public at large doesn't know much about, is how to protect against EM fields and also Wi-Fi, which might come from outside or the next one.
Yeah.
And of course, more personally, most worryingly, 5G.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we don't know at the moment exactly what the 5G resonance is going to be. But,
yeah.
But do you know of, since you've been doing all this research and stuff, do you know of anything that might be going to help?
Yeah, I mean, 5G, there's so much crazy stuff, I'd say, on the internet, and it's almost, you have to wait till it comes, but yeah, I agree. How the frequencies of 5G are buildings that are made out of dense materials, so even your concrete blocks and so long as it's some sort of solid construction, they're really bad at the current phone signals that we have, so they don't shield much from, say, 2G networks or 4G. The really high frequencies, say 20 gigahertz, they actually do a really good job of. So I feel like in England, we're probably going to have an advantage over, say, in America, where they do something called stick frame, which is essentially wood, and this higher frequency stuff can just fly through. So I think if you are doing a new build situation and you're shielding for lower frequency stuff, because concrete blocks and things like that don't do any attenuation at those frequencies, I think we'll be covered on the spectrum. It'd be interesting. But with all this stuff, it's population density. If you're living in London, I don't think you can hack your environment. And this all goes back to our first principles about where you live and the environment. Cool. Thanks a lot, guys. So clays are pretty much a wonder product. It can do something called adsorbing, and what that'll do is pollutants that are in the air, so VOCs, formaldehyde, it will actually bind to that surface and then decompose it into sort of friendlier toxins. And also it's really good at regulating relative humidity. So it has a property called hygroscopic, which basically means if there's humidity generated in that room, it can just go suck it all in, and then when the source of generation's left that room, it then releases it back in its own time. So yeah, clay is a wonder product. The only thing I'd say is test for radon, because clay can have high levels of radon, which is a radioactive gas. And interestingly, it's the second biggest cause of lung cancer in the UK. So it's worth testing that. But yeah, we're using in our buildings a clay block that's actually been engineered. And in Germany, they've been using them for about 40 years, and half their new builds use them. And yeah, it's just a clay block that almost looks like a concrete block, but instead of there being mortar, they just have these tongue and groove systems, so it's almost a dry system, and then you don't have all that moisture in the building, you haven't had to use all that water, and you're not going to run into the relative humidity issue. So yeah, again, if you're doing a new building, that's a great product, and it's called a Ziegel block.
And hempcrete, do you know what it is?
And hempcrete, yeah, so yeah.
The best. And this is just from England and Ireland.
Yeah, for us, there's been a couple of things with hempcrete. I've heard a few anecdotal stories with issues with water and them sort of decomposing. And also in a commercial environment, we have to provide warranties for these houses for 10 years. So, we're really wanting to create these healthy environments. That's our main thing. But we have to do it within the rules of building regulations, and also NHBC, who give these warranties for 10 years. So it's interesting. It's a bit of a minefield. So for us, Hempcrete's not been on the thing, but great product to look at.